I'm Dr. Rachel Walker. I'm a registered nurse and an assistant professor at UMass Amherst College of Nursing. But I want you first to travel back in time with me to 2003. Before I was a nurse, I was a Peace Corps volunteer assigned to a rural clinic near the edge of the Sahara. And one day, a very, very young woman came stumbling into the clinic. And I looked at her very, very round belly, and there, hanging between her legs, was an umbilical cord. Me, I wasn't a nurse, and the nurse, as is so often the case in so many parts of the world, the only healthcare provider there. So I called the nurse, and the nurse came over, and she laid the woman down on the floor, and she went to work. She was talking to her, her hands were moving, she was assessing the baby was breech, and she started ever so carefully to change the position of that child. And several minutes later, a baby was born. But it wasn't over yet. Very soon after that, a second baby was born. Yes. No monitors, no drugs, no devices, no doctor. Nearest OR over 100 kilometers away. And if they had cut her open, she probably would have either bled to death or died of infection later. So I saw this and I thought, wow, I want that superpower. And not just the power to deliver a baby, that power of presence with a patient. I want to be a nurse. So fast forward several years later, I'm a registered nurse working at one of the most technologically advanced hospitals in the world. The pace is relentless. The monitoring is continuous. The alarms are incessant. I can barely steal 1 to 2 minutes at the bedside to provide hands-on care to my patient, much less talk to them, be present with them. In fact, during a 12-hour shift, which is actually a 14-hour shift, I would have to take my one break of the day, sign off the rest of my patients just to spend a few moments at the bedside with someone, maybe somebody who was reaching the end of life, to talk to them about what that meant for them and how we could support them in being well. And one day, one of the patients I'd been taking care of for nearly a year at that point waited until the doctors had left the room. Nurses know this is not uncommon. And he turned to me and he said, "Rachel, I don't even feel human anymore." Now, never in any of the other parts of the world where I had taken care of people had someone told me, "I don't feel human." This was a crisis, and this is a crisis in healthcare. And I've been part of cancer clinical trials. I've delivered first-in-human trials. I've seen the power of invention, so I'm not anti-invention. But what I'm worried about is the lack of attention to human dignity in the design process. That too often, nurses like me, and patients, and family members, and caregivers are not at the table, not invited to the table, perhaps, when it comes to decisions about design and invention. And by the table, I don't mean that we're not involved in implementation or that people don't come and ask us how to make this thing work in the clinic. I mean the table where decisions get made about what the questions are that we're asking, what data we're collecting, how we're going to solve these problems. This problem has become so serious that just this past week at the international gathering of the Research Congress for Nurses, one of the key speakers suggested that nurses needed to start bringing their own chairs to the table when we weren't invited. And that's what we've been trying to do for a very long time. But we can't do it alone. So you might wonder, why nurses? Why is it so important to have a nursing perspective in some of these problems? You know, we talk to physicians, we talk to other people in healthcare, we involve the patients from time to time. Why nurses? And that's partially because nurses have a fundamentally different way of thinking about problems and finding solutions. And to illustrate that, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. And you can keep them to yourself, don't say them out loud. The first question is, how healthy are you? Think about that. How healthy are you? All right, now I'm going to give you a nursing take on that question. What does health look like for you? Do you see the difference? It's subtle, but it's there. One question asks you to compare yourself to some external standard set by someone else that may or may not, as Pratik was mentioning, have included your data when it was developed. The other puts you in the driver's seat and asks you where you want to go. One privileges numbers, the other your voice. One physiology, the other function, and your ability to do what's meaningful to you. So this is a very important difference in how we think about problems. And this is how we think about problems at the University of Massachusetts. When I arrived there, they were in the process of launching an interdisciplinary applied life sciences center that brings scientists from every different disciplinary background together to solve problems. And as an oncology nurse, I spend a lot of time talking to cancer survivors, because for my team, the process of invention starts with the person and what they see as what they need to get to a place where they have health. And so what have we learned and what have we started building as a result of this? Well, one thing our breast cancer survivors told us is, my fingers, they hurt so much, the nerve damage as a result of some of the cancer therapies I'm on. I can barely move them, much less exercise. And others have told me, I'm just gonna have to learn to live with it. So we partnered with a chemist, a wearable electronics lab, to start developing smart garments to help palliate the pain of these things called neuropathies, so people could do what was meaningful to them. We had people who told us, my family is so important to me. And these days, many people take things like chemotherapy at home. I'm worried about it passing through my system, what my family's being exposed to. I can't be intimate with my partner. I don't know what's in, the things coming out of me. And so we partnered with a chemical engineer. We started building and prototyping microfluidic devices to detect the toxic byproducts of drugs we give people in their systems. We also had people who told us, I'm so tired. And it's been months since I went through cancer treatment. My hair is back. I look normal to everyone else. Nobody understands. They don't believe me. Seems like it's all in my head sometimes. And so, we don't know yet the best ways to treat all forms of symptoms like fatigue, but we can help people show them to others. So we used eye tracking technology being developed in computer science, and with help with people from the neurosciences, we started measuring how these symptoms were impacting the people, actually changing their ability to use their eyes, putting a number to an otherwise invisible symptom that they could show other people. And we don't know if all of these projects are going to be successful. We don't know if they'll all lead to patents or companies or licensing. But what our patient advocates tell us, because that's who we have on our team, is the fact that we're paying attention, the fact that we're trying to solve these problems in the first place gives them hope. We also know it's not just helping people feel better, it can save lives. So when Hurricane Maria struck, and our colleagues, nurse scientists in Puerto Rico, were texting me, we're running out of electricity, or we don't have electricity, we're running out of water, we don't have enough supplies at the hospital. I'd seen this before. I worked as a triage nurse in Port-au-Prince after the earthquake, where we ran out of IV fluids, the most basic staple of emergency care. There is no reason for that. So we said, there's gotta be a better way. Why do people have to have heavy, fragile bags of IV fluids shipped to them across an ocean? Why can't we generate those at the point of care? We have the technology. So we found, we searched all the patents in the patent database. We found gaps in the existing processes. We found an industrial partner. We partnered with other scientists, and now we're building a portable system that could be used in disaster areas or in low resource areas to purify water at the point of care and generate those IV fluids so people don't have to die. So, I'm a little passionate, sorry, I got excited about this, but we're not the first. Nurses have been doing this for a very long time. They didn't necessarily always call themselves inventors, because we call it doing our jobs. This is Bessie Blunt Griffin. In the 1950s, she was an African-American nurse taking care of veterans who were paralyzed during World War II. And she saw the importance from a human dignity perspective that they be able to feed themselves. So she invented an electronic feeding system, which she patented, but the US government, the Veterans Administration, wouldn't buy it from her because she was a nurse and a woman and Black, so she had to sell it to the French government. There are many more stories like this, and I'd love to say that these are all history, but the barriers remain. Nurses and others in the caring professions, social work, occupational therapy, have been doing this for years, and they have come so far. But we still see underrepresentation of people from our professions in the innovation and the invention space, and again, too, on boards and in places of power where decisions about what gets made are made. The Precision Medicine Initiative, which Pratik just shared about, that promises to change the face of healthcare in this nation and beyond. But the primary advisory board for the Precision Medicine Initiative, also named All of Us, does not have a single nurse on it. In fact, you have to go to an advisory committee to the advisory committee to find the first nurse. The other day, I crashed an industry meeting that was mostly pharmaceutical executives. This is what I do, it's guerrilla style. And they were talking about how can we make people take the medications the right way? What technology can we get to make them adherent? And I offered, because I'm a nurse, well, could we have a different conversation? Could we talk about not just how to make people take medications properly, but how to provide the support they need to be able to take these drugs that may save their lives? And there were some sympathetic nods from the rest of the group, but then one person kind of suggested, well, they should just feel lucky to be alive. No, they should not feel lucky to be alive. We can do better. And nurses have the theory and the science and the interventions to address these kinds of problems. We've been doing it for a very long time, but research tells us that in order to see a culture change, you need at least 10% of the people to have the same commitment to the beliefs and values to make that happen. So not even just 10%. How many biotech R&D teams have a single nurse, much less 10% of the nurses at the table where the decisions are made? Not enough. So I'd like you to think about, not just here, but globally. Nurses work in every part of the world, oftentimes, again, the only healthcare provider. And nurses work across every sector of society, from hospitals to the home, to schools, to prisons, to shelters for persons fleeing violence. Imagine a world where every nurse who has a spark of an idea for how to solve one of these serious challenges was empowered to bring that idea into reality. That's invention, and that's justice. And that's the kind of world I'd like to live in. If that's the kind of world you'd like to live in too, there are some great resources. If you're a nurse, there are increasingly resources out there to support you, including the recently launched AAA Innovation Awards, as well as groups like VentureWell. And if you're not a nurse, but you're involved in any enterprise that involves human health, think about how can you involve a nurse in that work. There's a great group called Nurses on Boards, coalition.org, can help you find that person to help bring that to your team. Thank you, AAAS, and to the Lemelson Foundation.